Two employees work at the same company with identical skills and effort. One complains about unfairness, documents everything, waits for merit to be recognized. The other shapes perception, manages relationships, controls what gets measured. Guess whose career accelerates while the other stays stuck, wondering why hard work isn't enough? Everyone believes competence determines success. What if I told you that invisible rules decide outcomes long before your effort matters? Most people spend entire careers optimizing performance while missing the architecture that actually distributes rewards. The system doesn't hide power because it's secretive. It hides power because invisible control is more efficient than visible force. When you walk into any organization, you see mission statements and values, but the real structure lives elsewhere. What actually gets rewarded here versus what gets claimed? If you cannot answer that question precisely, you're operating blind. Organizations don't function according to what they say. They function according to what they measure and what they ignore. Power operates through metrics that seem neutral but quietly reshape behavior. A company measures quarterly earnings. Managers sacrifice long-term stability. A school measures test scores. Teachers abandon critical thinking. A hospital measures patient throughput. Doctors reduce consultation time. The metric becomes the mission. Whatever gets tracked becomes truth. And most people never question whether the scoreboard itself is designed correctly. If understanding how invisible power actually operates interests you, consider subscribing to Prof. Jung Explained. This channel examines the mechanisms that shape outcomes before individual effort enters the equation. Share this with someone who works hard but wonders why results don't match effort. They need to see what's really being optimized. The first hidden mechanism is incentive architecture. You don't need to command people directly. You simply design what gets rewarded. What gets punished? Over time, behavior adjusts automatically. People internalize the logic. They begin believing this is just how things work. The most sophisticated control systems are the ones where compliance feels like personal choice. Think about how social media platforms function. No one forces you to post. No one orders you to engage. But the architecture of likes and shares gently steers you toward certain content. Outrage spreads faster than nuance. Simplicity spreads faster than complexity. You craft your voice not around truth, around visibility. You tell yourself you're expressing freely. Meanwhile, the system is shaping what you express. The second mechanism is narrative control. Whoever defines success controls millions of decisions without issuing commands. If success means wealth, people sacrifice health. If success means status, people sacrifice authenticity. If success means obedience, people sacrifice curiosity. Notice how early this begins. Children learn what counts. Grades count, rankings count, trophies count, kindness is nice. Secondary, depth is interesting, inefficient. Gradually, a hierarchy of value gets constructed. Children grow into adults measuring themselves against it. They don't realize the hierarchy was designed. They think it's natural. It isn't natural. It's engineered. Power also operates through silence. What never gets discussed can be as powerful as what's loudly proclaimed. In most organizations, certain questions simply aren't asked. Why are we doing this? Who benefits? What are long-term consequences? The absence of these questions protects existing structures. People who dare ask them get labeled. Difficult, naive, disloyal. This is social pressure functioning as control. You don't need formal punishment, just informal discomfort. Whistleblowers are rare, not because wrongdoing is rare, because belonging is powerful. Humans are social creatures. Exclusion feels like danger. Power exploits this instinct. It creates cultures where conformity feels safe. Dissent feels risky. Over time, people censor themselves. No dictator required. They become their own gatekeepers. Another mechanism is temporal control. Power favors those who think long-term, while forcing others into short-term survival mode. If you're struggling to pay rent, you cannot strategize 10 years ahead. If you're overwhelmed with immediate tasks, you cannot question broader structures. Scarcity narrows attention. It traps you in reaction mode. Meanwhile, those with security design systems patiently. They can afford to wait. Time becomes leverage. Consider how this operates in politics and economics. Policies get framed around urgent crises. Fear compresses decision time. It pushes citizens to accept solutions quickly. During panic, oversight weakens. Complexity gets simplified. Decisions made under pressure often reshape institutions for decades. The crisis fades, the architecture remains. Power understands this. Chaos creates redesign opportunities. Perhaps the most subtle mechanism is identity engineering. If you shape how people see themselves, you shape behavior without force. Tell a group they're victims. Some internalize helplessness. Tell a group they're superior. Some internalize entitlement. Tell individuals their worth equals productivity. They'll measure themselves by output. Identity becomes self-enforcing. Ask yourself this carefully. Who taught you what you're supposed to want? Who taught you what kind of life is respectable? Who taught you what failure looks like? These ideas didn't emerge in isolation. They were transmitted through family, media, institutions, culture. Power is generational. It embeds itself in expectations. You absorb it before you can critique it. You might object. Individuals rise from nothing? Yes, they do, but look closely. Even revolutions often adopt structures they opposed. Power mechanics aren't just external, they're internalized. We learn the language of dominance from systems we inhabit. We replicate what we claim to resist. There's the meritocracy illusion. If everyone believes the system is fair, those at the top appear deserving, those at the bottom appear responsible, structural advantages disappear, the narrative becomes simple. You get what you earn. This stabilizes hierarchy better than force. Yet meritocracy layers upon unequal starting points. Access to networks, mentorship, cultural capital. These are invisible accelerators. The race begins at different starting lines, but the finish line gets presented as proof of virtue. Power manipulates attention. What you focus on becomes reality. News highlights certain conflicts, ignores others. Attention is finite. Controlling attention shapes perception. Language is never neutral. Words available limit thoughts you can form. If there's no language to describe exploitation, exploitation becomes harder to articulate. Power refines vocabulary. Civilian casualties become collateral damage. Layoffs become restructuring. Language softens impact. Once you see these mechanics, power isn't confined to governments. It exists in hiring decisions, in grading systems, in what you praise. Power flows through culture, like electricity, often unseen, deeply influential. What do you do with this awareness? Question metrics. Ask what's being rewarded. What behaviors get encouraged? Do incentives align with proclaimed values? The gap reveals true structure. Examine narratives. When someone tells you a success story, ask what's missing. When companies celebrate innovation, ask who bears failure costs. These questions don't make you cynical. They make you attentive. Personal power versus positional power. Many chase titles, status, visibility. Positional power is fragile, depends on external validation. Personal power is different. Thinking independently, withstanding pressure, aligning actions with values, cannot be easily taken away. Systems discourage personal power. Independent thinkers harder to predict. So conformity gets rewarded. People trade autonomy for approval, gain status, lose clarity. Observe what happens to those who challenge systems. Engaged in dialogue, dismissed. Treatment of dissent reveals health. Power is tool. Question is whether it's transparent, accountable. Questioning mechanics risks friction. But every improvement began with someone willing to articulate what others sensed. Courage must pair with strategy. Understand incentives deeply. Sometimes the most radical act isn't confrontation, it's redesign. Change what gets rewarded. Systems respond to structure better than speeches. You need humility. You're not outside power, you're within it. Power is relational. It exists between people. When recognition shifts, power shifts. History shows moments where permanent structures dissolved quickly. Once enough people reinterpreted the narrative, structures lost legitimacy. Normalization is underestimated. When something repeats long enough, it stops feeling strange. Long work hours become dedication. Constant surveillance becomes safety. Emotional burnout becomes ambition. Once normalized, these conditions aren't debated, they're expected. Normalization transforms choice into inevitability. Ask yourself how many behaviors feel like just the way things are. Why must promotions follow this path? Why must careers follow that timeline? The timeline itself is control. It generates anxiety, pressures conformity, punishes deviation. Power exploits comparison. When individuals get measured against each other constantly, solidarity weakens. You compete, guard information. Comparison creates scarcity and abundance. Ranking systems transform complex potential into single numbers. Once reduced to number, identity shrinks. Gatekeeping hides behind standards. Entry criteria get shaped by those already inside. Cultural codes, unspoken etiquette. When standards are opaque, they serve insiders. Expertise sometimes silences inquiry. When it becomes unquestionable, it shifts from knowledge to authority. Power solidifies when questioning gets framed as ignorance. Fear operates as lever, not dramatic fear. Subtle fear, fear of exclusion, fear of irrelevance. When fear governs decisions, people prioritize safety over integrity. They remain silent, avoid innovation. Systems built on fear appear stable. They're brittle. Distraction functions as mechanism. If attention constantly gets pulled toward entertainment or outrage, deeper questions remain untouched. Distraction fragments focus. A distracted population is easier to steer. Fragmentation works similarly. Divide groups so they cannot see shared interests. They struggle organizing. Power hides in procedure. Bureaucracy can paralyze. Layers of approval dilute accountability. Decisions get delayed until urgency fades. Procedure becomes shield, slowing change without opposing it. Internal hierarchy operates even without external pressure. Individuals rank themselves, compare constantly. Once hierarchy lives inside you, external enforcement becomes unnecessary. You police yourself. Power isn't single entity. It's reinforcing patterns. Incentives shape behavior. Narratives shape aspiration. Metrics shape identity. Language shapes perception. The danger is they operate invisibly. When invisible, they feel inevitable. When inevitable, they rarely get challenged. Even if you dismantle one structure, another emerges. Humans organize, create hierarchies. The question isn't eliminating power, it's making it visible, revisable. Visibility changes behavior. When decision-making is transparent, trust increases. Listen to informal conversations. Do people speak honestly when authority is absent? Do they believe effort matters? These signals reveal more than official reports. Bring this to your life. Where are you on autopilot? Which ambitions are genuinely yours versus inherited? What metrics are you chasing? Who defined them? Awareness doesn't mean paralysis. It means intentionality. The real danger is complacency. The belief that because something always functioned a certain way, it must continue. Complacency protects inertia. Curiosity disrupts it. Ask how decisions get made. Ask what data gets prioritized. Ask who sits at the table. Power doesn't fear anger as much as sustained inquiry. Inquiry accumulates evidence, builds coalitions, reshapes language. Understanding mechanics isn't about becoming manipulative, it's about becoming less manipulable. Power isn't somewhere out there. It's woven into incentives, language, metrics, timelines, expectations. It shapes what you admire, fear, chase, ignore. If you never examine it, you unconsciously serve it. The moment you question who defines success, who benefits from certain rules, what behaviors are quietly being engineered, you reclaim agency. You may not control the entire system, but you control how consciously you move within it. If you understand mechanics, you stop being pawn who blames fate. You become strategist who sees patterns. You become harder to manipulate, intimidate, distract. Once you see the architecture, you cannot unsee it. There's another layer, credibility systems. Organizations reward visibility of results. If your work is invisible, it doesn't count. The person who documents achievements gets recognized. The person who quietly performs gets overlooked. Visibility precedes merit. Meeting dynamics reveal this. Who speaks first frames the conversation. Who speaks confidently gets remembered more than who speaks accurately. These micro-behaviors accumulate into trajectories. None are taught explicitly. Power operates through permission structures. The person waiting for permission gets labeled cautious. The person acting without permission gets labeled leadership. Same action, different frame. Proximity changes opportunities. Being close to decision makers means hearing about openings first, becoming default choice for projects. Network effects compound. Strong network gets information faster, gets defended when mistakes happen. None of this is written down. If it were visible, it would be challengeable, so it remains implicit, understood by insiders, invisible to outsiders. The people who rise fastest aren't always hardest workers. They understand which work gets valued, make work visible. Recognized performance alone is never enough. The system rewards recognized performance. Recognition is separate process. This is why work harder feedback rarely helps. Problem isn't effort, it's visibility, alignment. Most people optimize for wrong scorecard. Real power literacy means asking different questions. Not how do I work harder, but what does the system actually reward? Not how do I deserve promotion, but how do I position myself as obvious choice? These aren't manipulative questions. They're structural. Systems have visible rules and invisible rules. If you only follow visible rules, you'll wonder why less deserving people advance. They're following different rulebook. The one you decode through observation. Share this with someone who says hard work should be enough. Systems function according to actual incentive structures, not stated values. Until you understand the difference, you'll be surprised by outcomes that are perfectly predictable once you see real architecture. And that awareness changes how you move.